January 15th, 2025. A quiet morning in rural Jefferson County, New York. A simple welfare check turned deadly.
Three shots fired. Don't do it! Don't fucking move!
Within minutes, 32-year-old Samuel Beilby was lying motionless in the snow, shot by a state trooper outside his own home. But what really happened that morning? Was Trooper John Miller justified in pulling the trigger, or did a call for help spiral into a fatal misunderstanding? Body cam footage, eyewitness accounts, and the Attorney General's official report all tell a story of confusion, fear, and tragedy. Stay with us as we uncover the truth behind the investigation and the moment that changed two lives forever. If you're passionate about real-life investigations and want to hear untold stories like this, make sure to subscribe to Real Crime Pulse and hit the bell icon so you never miss a case that matters. On the cold morning of January 15th, 2025, a welfare check in rural Jefferson County, New York, unfolded into a tragedy that would draw statewide scrutiny. 32-year-old Samuel Beilby was fatally shot outside his home by State Trooper John Miller after a tense and rapidly escalating confrontation. What began as a call for assistance ended with a man's death, a community's grief, and an official inquiry into whether the use of deadly force had been justified. The New York State Attorney General's Office of Special Investigation, known as OSI, immediately opened a review, as mandated by law whenever a civilian dies during an encounter with law enforcement. The report sought to determine whether Trooper Miller's actions complied with state statutes and police protocols governing the use of lethal force. Earlier that morning, dispatch logs recorded several 911 calls describing Beilby's unusual and erratic behavior. Neighbors told responding officers that he appeared disoriented and was possibly armed. When the first troopers arrived, they found him outside his residence, visibly agitated and holding what seemed to be a firearm. Within minutes, the encounter intensified. Commands were issued, warnings were repeated, and then gunfire erupted, ending Beilby's life at the scene. In the investigation that followed, the OSI would dissect each moment, each decision, to understand what went wrong that morning, and why prosecutors ultimately ruled that no criminal charges would be brought against Trooper Miller. Samuel Beilby was a lifelong resident of Jefferson County, New York, a quiet man whose life, though largely ordinary, revealed signs of deep personal struggle in the months before his death. Those who knew him described someone reserved but intelligent, a man who preferred solitude to crowds. He had no serious criminal record, only minor interactions with police over the years, none suggesting violent behavior. Family members told investigators that Beilby's demeanor began changing in the months leading up to January 2025. He became increasingly withdrawn, isolating himself from friends and relatives. Once talkative and mechanically inclined, he stopped answering calls and was rarely seen outside except to tend to small tasks around his property. Neighbors recalled seeing him pacing near his driveway at odd hours, sometimes appearing confused or distracted. Behind that quiet exterior, Beilby seemed to be battling inner turmoil. The OSI report noted ongoing concerns about his mental health, though no formal diagnosis had been recorded. There were also mentions of possible substance use, though evidence remained inconclusive. By early January, these changes had become impossible to ignore. Loved ones described him as anxious, paranoid, and struggling to manage his emotions. Investigators later emphasized that Beilby's behavior on the morning of his death was not premeditated or malicious, but the culmination of increasing distress, a tragic convergence of mental instability, isolation, and circumstance that would lead to one irreversible moment. The morning of January 15, 2025, began with several urgent 911 calls from residents of Jefferson County. Callers reported that a man was outside his rural property, pacing erratically and holding what appeared to be a handgun. That man was later identified as 32-year-old Samuel Beilby. The tone of the dispatch recordings captured the confusion and unease in the neighborhood, a mix of fear and concern for Beilby's safety. At approximately 8:00 a.m., 2 New York State troopers, including Trooper John Miller, were dispatched to the scene. Following standard safety protocol, they parked their vehicles a short distance away from Beilby's residence and assessed the situation from behind cover. Body cameras were activated, and each officer was equipped with standard service weapons and protective gear. When Beilby came into view, he was visibly agitated and shouting incomprehensible phrases. Trooper Miller began verbal communication, issuing clear and repeated commands for Beilby to drop his weapon. Despite the instructions, Beilby continued moving unpredictably, refusing to comply. His pacing grew more erratic, and his hands gripped the firearm tightly. Miller requested additional units, aware that the situation could deteriorate rapidly. Yet before backup arrived, the confrontation escalated. Witnesses from nearby homes later told investigators that Beilby appeared to raise his arm, pointing the gun in the trooper's direction. That split-second movement transformed the encounter from negotiation to survival, setting the stage for the deadly decision that would follow only moments later. Body-worn camera footage later revealed the final seconds of Samuel Beilby's life with chilling clarity. Standing in the front yard of his rural Jefferson County home, Beilby clutched what appeared to be a semi-automatic pistol. His posture was tense, his movements erratic. Trooper John Miller, maintaining a distance of roughly 30 feet, repeatedly shouted commands for him to drop the weapon. Each command was firm, direct, and captured clearly on video. For nearly half a minute, Beilby failed to comply. He shouted back incoherently, his voice uneven and strained. The footage showed his body shifting between stillness and sudden motion, his grip on the firearm never loosening. Then, in a single decisive moment, Beilby raised the gun toward the officers. Trooper Miller reacted instantly, firing 3 shots from his service weapon. 2 bullets struck Beilby in the torso, and a third hit his lower abdomen. He collapsed almost immediately, falling onto the snow-covered ground. Within seconds, Miller radioed for medical assistance and approached cautiously, his weapon still drawn until the scene was secure. The firearm near Beilby's hand was quickly retrieved and confirmed to be a functional, loaded pistol. Paramedics arrived minutes later. But despite attempts at life-saving measures, Beilby was pronounced dead at the scene. Investigators later verified that no shots were fired from Beilby's weapon. Still, the position of his raised gun, captured on video, became the central factor in determining why Trooper Miller perceived an immediate and deadly threat. In the hours following the shooting, the quiet rural neighborhood of Jefferson County transformed into an active crime scene. Yellow tape stretched across Beilby's driveway as state police investigators and evidence technicians arrived to secure the area. Trooper John Miller, visibly shaken, was immediately placed on administrative leave, a standard procedure in any officer-involved shooting. His duty weapon was collected for examination, and preliminary interviews were conducted at the scene. The New York State Police quickly notified the Attorney General's Office of Special Investigation, triggering an independent review as required by state law. The OSI's mandate ensured transparency whenever police action resulted in a civilian death. Forensic specialists began documenting every detail: body camera footage, ballistic evidence, and radio transmissions between dispatch and responding units. Neighbors provided varying accounts of what they had witnessed. Some described Beilby's erratic movements and the repeated commands from officers to drop his weapon. Others said they never expected the situation to end in gunfire. Miller, in his first statement to investigators, said that he believed Beilby was about to shoot and that he had no other choice but to fire in defense. Throughout the day, police vehicles lined the rural road and investigators worked through freezing temperatures to reconstruct the chain of events. By nightfall, Beilby's body had been transported for autopsy, the firearm logged into evidence, and the first stage of the inquiry into his death officially underway. The Office of Special Investigations' review of the shooting was detailed and methodical. From the moment their team arrived in Jefferson County, investigators focused on reconstructing every second of the encounter between Samuel Beilby and Trooper John Miller. They examined the body-worn camera footage frame by frame, analyzed forensic evidence from the scene, and interviewed everyone who had contact with either man that day. The OSI's objective was clear: to determine whether the use of deadly force had been legally justified under New York law. Autopsy results confirmed that Beilby had sustained multiple gunshot wounds to the chest and abdomen, consistent with the direction and trajectory of Miller's rounds. Toxicology findings showed the presence of controlled substances in Beilby's system, though at levels too low to be considered impairing. The physical evidence, including shell casings and ballistic trajectories, aligned with Miller's statement that he fired only after Beilby raised his firearm toward him. Investigators also assessed compliance with police training and de-escalation policy.
That's all right.
The OSI report noted that Miller had attempted communication and issued numerous verbal warnings before using force. While de-escalation is always preferred, the immediacy of the threat left limited alternatives. After reviewing all materials, video, photographs, dispatch logs, and autopsy data, the OSI concluded that the sequence of events supported Miller's account. The evidence showed that the situation transitioned from containment to self-defense in a matter of seconds, leaving the officer with no reasonable option other than to fire. The fatal shooting of Samuel Beilby sent shockwaves through Jefferson County, a region unaccustomed to such violent incidents. Within hours, word of the confrontation spread across social media, igniting debates about police conduct and mental health intervention. Neighbors who had witnessed parts of the event expressed sorrow but also confusion over how a welfare check had turned into a deadly encounter. "He wasn't a violent man," one resident told reporters. "He just needed help." Local community members gathered outside the Jefferson County courthouse in the days that followed, holding candles and signs calling for greater accountability and transparency. Some questioned whether enough had been done to de-escalate the situation before shots were fired. Others defended Trooper John Miller, describing him as a professional with an unblemished record who had been placed in an impossible situation. Family members of Beilby issued a brief statement, requesting privacy but urged the state to review how officers handle calls involving individuals in distress. Their plea echoed broader statewide discussions about the intersection between law enforcement and mental health crises. Meanwhile, the New York State Police emphasized that the shooting was under independent review and that they would fully cooperate with the OSI investigation. News outlets covered the case extensively, comparing it to other high-profile police incidents across the state. For many in Jefferson County, the tragedy underscored the delicate balance between public safety and compassion, and how quickly a moment meant to help can end in irreversible loss. After weeks of meticulous review, the Office of Special Investigation released its official report on the death of Samuel Beilby. The findings concluded that Trooper John Miller's use of deadly force was legally justified under New York penal law, Paragraph 3530, which allows officers to use such force when they reasonably believe it necessary to defend themselves or others from imminent deadly harm. The OSI emphasized that its analysis relied solely on verified evidence, body camera footage, forensic results, and sworn testimony. The report detailed that Beilby had ignored repeated commands to drop his firearm and had raised it toward Miller moments before the trooper discharged his weapon. Frame-by-frame analysis confirmed that the gun was pointed in the officer's direction, creating an immediate threat. The investigation found no indication that Miller acted recklessly or with criminal intent. In its legal assessment, the OSI compared the case to prior rulings involving police use of force, noting that officers are often required to make split-second decisions under extreme pressure. The report acknowledged the tragedy of Beilby's death, but stated that, under the circumstances, the law did not support criminal prosecution. The OSI also recommended that the New York State Police continue to strengthen de-escalation training and mental health response programs to reduce the likelihood of future confrontations. With the release of the report, the case was officially closed, marking the end of the state's investigation but not the community's ongoing conversation about how such incidents should be handled. The case of Samuel Beilby stands as another difficult example in the ongoing national conversation about police use of force and mental health crises. While the Office of Special Investigations findings cleared Trooper John Miller of criminal wrongdoing, the broader questions raised by Beilby's death remain unresolved. How should law enforcement respond when a person in distress is armed but not actively violent? At what point does perceived danger outweigh the duty to preserve life? For many residents of Jefferson County, the tragedy highlighted a gap between police training and the complex realities of mental health emergencies. Advocates argue that specialized crisis intervention teams, composed of both officers and mental health professionals, could help prevent similar outcomes in the future. Others believe that even the best training cannot always diffuse rapidly evolving, high-risk encounters. The New York State Police later confirmed that they were reviewing internal protocols related to wellness checks and use-of-force reporting. Community leaders pushed for additional resources to support both first responders and families dealing with behavioral health issues. In the months following the shooting, Local organizations hosted public forums to discuss reform, accountability, and the emotional toll such incidents take on rural communities. Ultimately, the story of Samuel Beilby serves as both a case study and a cautionary tale, a reminder of how quickly an attempt to offer help can end in irreversible tragedy. It challenges policymakers, law enforcement, and citizens alike to seek solutions that balance safety, empathy, and justice in moments when every second matters. In the end, the shooting of Samuel Beilby left behind more than an official report. It left a lasting question about how society responds to people in crisis. The Attorney General's investigation concluded that Trooper John Miller's actions were legally justified, but legality does not always bring closure. For Beilby's family, friends, and neighbors, the outcome offered little comfort. A young man's life had been lost during what began as a call for help, and a seasoned officer would forever carry the memory of that moment. The OSI's findings may have closed the legal file, but the moral and emotional weight of the case remains. Each detail, the frigid January air, the urgent radio calls, the split-second decision, serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of human life and the thin line officers walk between duty and consequence. As the months passed, Jefferson County slowly returned to normalcy, but the echoes of that morning never truly faded. Conversations about mental health, policing, and accountability continued in town halls and living rooms, urging change and understanding. The story of Samuel Beilby is not just about one man or one moment. It's about a system still learning how to protect and serve with both strength and compassion. And for those left behind, it remains a quiet tragedy etched into the cold winter landscape of upstate New York.